Today's video is so exciting. You can create so many different versions of a hot air balloon. And I used this watercolor paper for the first time, and it is super cheap, but it does not feel like it. This is the first time that I also started using smaller paper to paint watercolor. So the paper I'm using is about the same size as the original one that I did, but I have done so many smaller ones since then and different colors and styles. And I can do this from memory at this point, but I tried to see how small I could do a hot air balloon painting, and I was kind of surprised. So I am going to link to this paper because it really is so awesome. And this is a painting that took a long time, so I am going to speed some of it up. And I do want to tell you, though, it took me about an hour. And that's because I was really fine-tuning it because it just looked funky until I made some changes. So one of the things you can do different than me is to draw it out first and get the shape the way that you want it. But I also already had some of this color mixed up. So if you want to do the same color as me, it is blue with some black in it. So you get this grayish blue, this like slate blue, which I really like. But I like to freehand it, so I did not draw it beforehand. But because this is bigger than the ones I have been painting lately, it did take a lot longer, but it was still really relaxing and fun. And same with the oranges that I painted the other day. That was about 30 minutes, but that flew by. Like, it seemed to pass really fast. So here I'm really just starting with the shape of this, and that's part of why it's so easy to do, especially after you've done it a few times. Because it's just these 5 curved lines, and you really want to have the curve to where it looks like a balloon, like it looks like it's inflated. And that's what I really spent a lot of time on cleaning up at the end. But that's what I was impressed with this paper about, because I went over and over the same area, and it wasn't like peeling the paper or messing it up, but it was actually lifting some of the paint to where you didn't see these harsh lines, and I could kind of fix it and you couldn't tell that I had painted over it multiple times. I was really impressed with that because I don't think this is 100% watercolor paper. It just really mimics it well. So this was recommended by other watercolor artists, and I'm so glad. And I love it because it has hummingbirds on the front, which is another tutorial I will be doing eventually, because me and my husband love hummingbirds. And so I first painted one for him because he really likes them, but it was so fun. I've done multiple of those as well. So it may look kind of funny at first, but give it time and you really can work with it and get it to the shape that you want. Now, for this one hot air balloon that has like the orange and pink colors only, it was one that I did draw the lines out first and then painted, because the painted part is not like all vertical, they're horizontal instead. So that turned out better than I thought it was going to. I really liked it, and I liked the colors and everything. So you can get really creative. And so I do start out with the hot air balloon, and I like, rather than the basket, I mean, and I couldn't remember really if I started with the center or the sides. It might have been easier to start with the center, because then you know that it is also centered on the paper. But it worked out the way that I did it as well. But if you wanted to start with the center and then do the 2 furthest out to get the main shape, and then do the ones in between, that could be a good strategy and maybe be faster for you than it was for me as well. And I have done the baskets different ways, as you can see too. I have simplified them and done them shorter on some other ones, but for the one I'm doing now and the one you can see an example of, I found a picture that I liked, and so I was using that as my reference, and that's kind of why I chose that one. I also love painting hot air balloons because I love adventure and I want to go in a hot air balloon. I have not done it yet, but it is on my bucket list still. So I would love to hear if you have done it or not, or if you've just been to see them all aglow. I love that. My in-laws have done that and they had beautiful pictures, like so stunning, and kind of jealous. Okay. So that's part of why I love it. I also see it as like a little picture you could put in like a baby's nursery or something like that. And just something that's fun. And you can always go back and kind of darken it up and everything. One thing I realized while I was painting this is that it seemed like the basket was so far down from the balloon. So I did add a line like higher up, and I made it even higher eventually. And when I went back in on the hot air balloon part, I thickened up the parts at the bottom and everything so that it didn't look so elongated, I guess, anymore. And I really also tried to connect the basket to where it looked like it flowed into the hot air balloon and was more of a continuous line rather than so disjointed like it was in the beginning. Although if you look at the other ones, that's just not as much of a problem on those. And I did do a lighter color because I've done that before as well, but then it does kind of darken up because I keep adding to it and doing some layers and everything. But this one, you really can just have fun with it, play with it, do different color stripes. I mean, you could even look up hot air balloons and just find a different design and pattern that you like. They're not all stripes, although I find that to be kind of easy and aesthetically pleasing. So that's what I've done so far. For the basket, I did use a brown color, but I also had some orange left over on my brush from painting the oranges because I actually recorded these in the same day. And so I mixed that in with the brown, and that was fine. But I do a lot of water on the basket to make it this lighter brown color and almost more like a tan. Well, the example picture that I'm using isn't as much like that, but I do like the framed example is a little bit darker, but I do like the lighter versions. And when you do lighter, you can add more detail or you can make it darker if you want. But starting out dark can make it where it's a little bit too dark. So be aware of that. I also tried to keep the lines really thin, and then I had some space that allowed me to thicken it up without it looking too funny. But you can also go in the basket and add some shading, like do part of the bottom that's darker, or you could even do little lines to make it look like a woven basket. And if you're like me, you just obsess and obsess and obsess and keep going and going until you like it. But it definitely looks like a hot air balloon at this point, so that's really exciting and makes me happy. And another thing about the notebook that I'm using, it has a little area, if you can't see, it's like perforated, is that what it's called? Where you can tear out the page. So for one, if you don't like it, then it's easy to tear it out so it's not stuck in your sketchbook forever, but also if you wanted to frame it or give it as a card or something, that's easy to do as well and really neat because I have a hard time cutting a straight line. So I actually bought a cutter and I can link to that as well. But if you get this awesome paper, then you wouldn't even need to do that. So that's really nice. It's so funny. I feel like this is like one of my signature paintings because I do it so much and I don't really see a lot of other watercolor artists painting hot air balloons all the time or showing a bunch of tutorials. I'm sure there are plenty out there, but oh, and I haven't seen a lot of sketchbooks that are spiral bound. I like spiral notebooks regularly for my like calendar type thing. And so I'm wondering if I will really like it for watercolor because why I like it for planning is that I can leave it open and I have that page where I can see what I need to do basically. And so I think I like it with watercolor too because you can just leave it flipped open to a pretty watercolor that you've done or have it flipped open to a blank page ready to start again. So it's a pretty good size, although I kind of think I do prefer still mostly having smaller watercolor papers. So what I started doing was cutting from my larger sketchbook, and my next video is going to talk about that and the other few things that really helped me start taking my watercolor to the next level from a very basic beginner to a more well-rounded and experienced beginner. So I hope you'll subscribe to watch that and my future painting tutorials. And if you do paint this, you can tag me or send it to me on Instagram at the Clutter Lady. Thanks for watching and happy painting!